What if I told you that a shy young girl, who never expected to rule, would one day become the longest reigning monarch of her time and give her name to an entire era? Few people know the surprising challenges, personal struggles, and remarkable influence that defined the reign of Queen Victoria. Join us as we gently unfold the inspiring life of a queen who shaped the destiny of an empire. Welcome to Legacy Narratives, where every story is a journey through history, wisdom, and memories worth remembering. The dawn of June 20th, 1837, broke over Kensington Palace with a soft, gray light. In a quiet bedroom, an 18-year-old girl was roused from her sleep with momentous news. Her uncle, King William IV, was dead. As she later wrote in her journal, she was summoned from her bed to meet the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain, who knelt before her. In that hushed, solemn moment, the slight, composed young woman ceased to be Princess Alexandrina Victoria of Kent and became Her Majesty Queen Victoria. The weight of a nation, an empire in the making, settled upon her shoulders. Her first order of business was to request an hour alone. It was a poignant glimpse into the character of the monarch who would define an age, a young girl on the cusp of womanhood, asserting her need for composure before embracing a destiny that would see her reign for 64 years. Her name forever etched into the annals of history as the sovereign of an era of unprecedented change, grandeur, and complexity. Victoria's childhood was less a fairy tale and more a carefully guarded preparation for the role she was born to play. She was born on May 24, 1819, the only child of Edward, Duke of Kent, and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. Her father died when she was but 8 months old, leaving her upbringing in the hands of her strong-willed and possessive mother, the Duchess of Kent, and her mother's ambitious comptroller, Sir John Conroy. They devised the stifling Kensington system, a set of rigid rules designed to keep the young heiress presumptive dependent, sheltered, and under their control. She was never allowed a moment alone. She slept in her mother's room, and her every movement was monitored. This isolation bred in her a fierce independence and a stubborn will, qualities that would later define her reign. Her greatest ally and confidant was her governess, Louise Latson, a kind and devoted woman who provided the affection sometimes lacking in her regimented life. When she learned of her accession, her first act was to banish Conroy from her presence and establish her independence from her mother. The young queen moved into Buckingham Palace, and for the first time, she could sleep in a room of her own. The British public, weary of the dissolute Hanoverian kings who preceded her, was captivated by this small, fair-haired queen with a steady gaze and a graceful manner. She was a breath of fresh air, a symbol of youthful innocence and moral rectitude. Under the wise guidance of her first prime minister, the avuncular Lord Melbourne, she began her political education. He was a father figure to her, and she soaked up his Whig principles with the eagerness of a devoted pupil. Yet, for all her newfound power, the young queen's life lacked a crucial element of companionship. This was fulfilled in 1839, when her cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, came to visit. She had met him once before, but now she saw him with new eyes. She was instantly smitten. In her journal, she wrote ecstatically of his beautiful blue eyes, exquisite nose, and pretty figure. It was she who proposed to him, as was the custom for a reigning monarch, and they were married on February 10, 1840. It was a love match of profound depth and intensity. "I never spent such an evening," she wrote after their wedding night. "My dearest, dear Albert. His excessive love and affection gave me feelings of heavenly love and happiness I never could have hoped to have felt before." Albert was not merely a husband, he was her intellectual partner, her political advisor, and her moral compass. The British establishment was initially wary of the serious, intellectual German prince, but Victoria would brook no criticism of him. She granted him the title of Prince Consort and leaned on his judgment completely. Together, they became the model of domestic virtue. They were devoted to their 9 children, whose marriages would eventually intertwine them with the royal houses of Europe, earning Victoria the sobriquet, the grandmother of Europe. Albert's influence was transformative. He championed the Great Exhibition of 1851, a spectacular celebration of British industrial might and global influence housed in the magnificent Crystal Palace. He encouraged advances in science and the arts, reformed the management of the royal households, and guided the Queen toward a more impartial view of politics, steering her away from her partisan Whig leanings. This period of married bliss was the heart of the early Victorian era. It was an age of growing prosperity, industrial innovation, and moral earnestness. The queen and prince consort, with their large family and seemingly impeccable character, embodied the ideals of the time. Paintings of the royal family depicted a scene of domestic harmony that the burgeoning middle class aspired to emulate. This golden period was shattered on December 14, 1861, with Albert's tragic death from typhoid fever at the age of 42. Victoria was utterly devastated. Her grief was all-consuming and would define the next 4 decades of her life. She plunged into a deep mourning from which she never fully emerged. She dressed in black for the rest of her life, withdrew from public view for years, and earned the nickname the Widow of Windsor. She avoided London and largely retreated to her homes at Osborne, Balmoral, and Windsor Castle. She allowed state papers to pile up, and her neglect of public duties led to a rise in Republican sentiment. For a time, the monarchy's popularity waned significantly. Her subjects began to wonder if they had a queen at all. It was the steadfast patience of her prime ministers, particularly the shrewd Benjamin Disraeli, who gradually coaxed her back into public life. Disraeli understood how to flatter and charm her. It was he who, in 1876, passed a bill conferring upon her the title of Empress of India, a move that appealed immensely to her sense of imperial destiny and helped rekindle her interest in governance. She was fascinated by the subcontinent, though she never visited, and took her role as empress very seriously. Her later reign was the apex of the British Empire. It was a period of immense power and global influence, but also of profound social change and anxiety. The Victorian era was a study in contrasts. Immense wealth generated by the Industrial Revolution existed alongside desperate poverty in sprawling cities. Rigid social conventions coexisted with groundbreaking scientific theories like Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, and a confident imperial spirit was matched by a pervasive sense of doubt and questioning. Through it all, Victoria became a symbol of steadfastness. She did not rule over this transformation as a dynamic leader, but as a constant, immovable presence. Her very longevity became a source of stability. She weathered the personal scandals that peppered her children's lives and the political challenges of her time. Her jubilees became national celebrations of her person and the empire she represented. The Golden Jubilee in 1887 was a moment of heartfelt appreciation for a monarch who had overcome great personal sorrow to remain at her post. The Diamond Jubilee in 1897 was a spectacular display of imperial might, a global tribute to the tiny old woman who was the symbolic head of a quarter of the world's landmass. In her final years, she was a matriarchal figure, revered and beloved. She had seen the world change beyond recognition: the spread of the railways, the invention of the telegraph, the rise of photography, and the beginning of the automobile age. She passed away on January 22, 1901, at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, surrounded by her family. Her death was felt as the end of an epoch. She was buried at Frogmore Mausoleum beside her beloved Albert, wearing her wedding veil. The legacy of Queen Victoria is as complex as the era that bears her name. She was not a great intellectual or a political innovator. Her power lay in her immense symbolic weight. She represented duty, resilience, and moral conviction. She elevated the monarchy from a discredited institution into a symbol of national and imperial identity, setting a standard of constitutional propriety that her successors would follow. Her personal tastes and the social mores she embodied, often strict, sometimes hypocritical, but always earnest, defined the Victorian character. The Victorian values of hard work, personal responsibility, family, and faith, for all their complexities and contradictions, continue to shape British society and the many nations once part of her empire. She was a woman of immense passion and equally immense will, who experienced the highest joys and the deepest sorrows in the full glare of her position. From the headstrong young queen to the heartbroken widow to the revered imperial matriarch, her life was a remarkable journey. She was, in the end, the steadfast heart of a century, a monarch whose name became synonymous with an age of progress, power, and profound change, leaving behind a world and a monarchy forever altered by her long and momentous reign.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through history and inspiration. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more timeless stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of today's story touched you the most? Please leave a comment below. Until next time, keep the legacy alive.